Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, the world seems to conspire against what we most desire? It's curious. We all started this journey with the same purity, with that spark of hope of building something beautiful with someone. But what happens after that? Why do so many stories that begin with promises end up dissolving into emptiness? Maybe you know this feeling well. You enter a conversation full of good intentions, believing that you just need to want it to make it happen. But in the end, the world proves otherwise. It's as if there is an abyss between what we dream of and what we can achieve. And as if that weren't enough, the frustration package comes with a bonus, an avalanche of doubts and questions that no one seems to be able to answer. Why did she stop responding? Was it something I said? What's wrong with me? These questions go around in circles, pulling us back to the same place, alone. No matter the reason that leads us to look for someone, be it need, curiosity, or simply the desire to be seen. The fact is that, at some point, we have all wanted love. But there is something strange going on. And I'm not just talking about a new culture of detachment, that philosophy that tells you not to care and to give up trying. I'm talking about something deeper, a feeling that relationships in general have become more difficult. Think about the constant comparisons on social media, the unrealistic standards of beauty, the growing distrust, and the relationships that seem to exist only to be displayed in posts with standardized captions. Have you noticed how all this seems to turn love into a bargaining chip? Dating has become almost a performative event, and the fear of being vulnerable is so great that people prefer to keep connections on the surface. At a trap show, we heard someone shout that he was more single than an expired soda, and we thought it was funny. But deep down we know there is something wrong with this. And what happens to those who really want to find something genuine? Those people who are looking for a true connection, a relationship where they can simply be themselves. For these people, perhaps you are one of them, the path seems even more tortuous. It seems that the more we search, the more we come across that cycle. You try, you start well, you feel like it's working, but suddenly, everything changes. Messages turn cold, enthusiasm fades, and what once seemed like a sunny day turns into a silent storm. But why does this happen so much? Why do relationships that start out promising end so abruptly? Are we making a mistake at some crucial point without even realizing it? Or are we all so caught up in expectations that we've forgotten how to truly connect? The truth is, to answer these questions, we need to look at something beyond modern dynamics. We need to look inside. What are we looking for when we look for someone? Are we trying to fill a void? Are we following the rules we were taught? Those generic phrases like relax, be yourself, or are we creating something truly our own? These reflections take us to an uncomfortable but necessary place, and at the same time, they leave a question in the air that moves us forward. Are we ready to face what prevents us from truly connecting? That's where the journey begins. A journey to understand not only what is wrong, but also how we can begin to change. What's behind so many failed connections? What are we really looking for when we look for love? If these questions bother you, you are in the right place. Let's dive in deeper, and believe me, what comes next could change the way you see the world around you. Relax, don't think too much, be yourself. I bet you've heard this more times than you can count. It's the kind of advice that seems simple and powerful, but ultimately sounds like a riddle. How exactly do you not think too much? And what does it mean to be yourself, especially when you don't even know exactly who you are or when you're feeling vulnerable? Now imagine this. You meet someone who piques your interest. You start talking, everything seems to flow. But then that discomfort appears, an internal voice that starts to sabotage the moment. Am I saying the right things? Am I acting the way I should? Without realizing it, you begin to move away from what is natural and authentic and shape every word, every gesture to please. It's almost automatic. You want to be accepted. You want people to like you. And that's understandable. After all, who doesn't want to be loved? But here's the problem. The more you try to be perfect, the more you disconnect. You are no longer interacting with the person. You are interacting with the reflection of your own insecurities. And the result? Instead of building a bridge, you end up building walls. Think about it. Have you ever caught yourself praising someone exaggeratedly, trying to seem funnier, more interesting, or more easy to like? Maybe you thought something like, if I'm nice enough, she'll notice me. If I'm funny, she'll want to be with me. But what is really happening in these moments? The truth is, when we're starved for connection, we lose the ability to genuinely care about each other. Without realizing it, we turn our interactions into transactions. We don't want to know the person, we want approval. We want to fill a void, and that's when everything starts to go wrong. Let me illustrate this with a story. Imagine a guy named Lucas. Lucas is the kind of person who, on the surface, seems to do everything right. He's polite, compliments the girl he's talking to, makes light jokes, and even offers help when she needs it. But deep down, Lucas isn't there for her. He's there for himself. Every message he sends, every kind gesture, is accompanied by an expectation. Will she like me now? When the girl starts to respond less, Lucas panics. He tries even harder, write longer messages, ask desperate questions, prays more than ever. But the distance only increases. Until one day, she stops responding completely. And Lucas, broken, returns to the initial question, "What's wrong with me?" And the answer is simple but painful. It's not about how Lucas acts or talks. It's about the fact that he's so focused on being accepted that he forgets to really see others. Deep down, he's not in a relationship. He's projecting his own insecurities. And this is not exclusive to Lucas. It's something we all do, to a greater or lesser extent, because no one teaches us how to love. There isn't a class in school that explains how to truly connect with someone, so we end up following generic scripts, imitating what we see or hear, hoping it works. But how can you hope to build something real if all you're doing is trying to avoid appearing vulnerable? And here's another trap. When these efforts fail, instead of reflecting on what's happening, we turn against ourselves. That destructive cycle begins. It's because I'm ugly. It's because I'm boring. It's because I'm incapable of pleasing anyone. But is that really it? Or are we so focused on our flaws that we forget to look beyond them? When we fixate on this mindset, we become prisoners of a false narrative. Because you see, the problem isn't that you're inadequate, it's that you're trying to fit a puzzle together with pieces that don't belong to you. And you know what's saddest? It's just that the more we try to please, the more we reinforce the idea that we are not enough. It's a never-ending cycle. But what would happen if, for a moment, you stopped trying to prove something? What would happen if, instead of seeking approval, you simply listened? If instead of worrying about impressing, you focused on being present? This may seem simple, but it is transformative. When you stop treating interactions as an opportunity to be validated, they become something much more genuine. You start to see the other person as they really are, and more importantly, you allow them to see you too. And this is where I challenge you. The next time you find yourself in this spiral of doubts, insecurities, and self-depreciation, stop, breathe. Ask yourself, am I here to get to know this person or to protect myself from my own insecurities? If you like this reflection, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Here, we'll continue exploring the nuances of human connections, questioning cliched advice, and uncovering what really matters. Your journey to understanding love and relationships can start now, and I promise it will be worth it. After all, you deserve more than just fitting in. You deserve to be genuinely seen. Shall we go together? Have you ever stopped to think about why we get so obsessed when someone seems to pay less attention to us? It's not just about liking the person, it's about the way they make you feel. In the moments when her attention is on you, it's as if the world becomes lighter, easier to bear. Your insecurities, your anxieties, your doubts, everything disappears even if for a few seconds. It's almost like an anesthetic relief. And here's the trap. We start to confuse this feeling of relief with the person next to us. We start to believe that it solves our problems, when in fact all that happened was that our mind found a break. But what happens when this pause is interrupted? When the person takes a long time to respond, acts more distant, or simply doesn't reciprocate the enthusiasm? If you've ever experienced this, and I'm sure you have, you know it's like a dizzying fall. You start to wonder, what did I do wrong? Has she lost interest? Did I say something I shouldn't have? And before you know it, you're stuck in a cycle. With each small interaction, you invest even more, trying to regain that feeling of fulfillment you felt at the beginning. But the more you try, the more distant everything seems to get. Now let's break a pattern here. Is the problem really with the other person? Or does the problem lie in the expectations we create around it? It's like walking into a dance where you're both supposed to be listening to the same song, but instead you have one headphone on, stuck in a completely different soundtrack. While the other person is living the reality of the moment, you are stuck in an internal game of approval and validation. Imagine this. You meet someone new, you text each other for days, and each conversation is better than the last, but then, without warning, something changes. She takes longer to respond and her messages don't have the same enthusiasm, and then you go into fix mode. You try to compensate, try harder, ask more questions, send more messages, and do you know what happens? Instead of bringing them closer together, it pushes them further apart. Why? Because the connection that seemed to be there was replaced by a battle of expectations. It's no longer about two people getting to know each other. It's about you trying to regain control of something you never really had. The other person, when feeling this pressure, inevitably moves away, and so the cycle continues. But what can we do to break this pattern? Before you answer, let me ask you something. How many times have you tried to not care or pretend you don't care? That's classic advice, isn't it? Show disinterest, and the person will value you. And indeed, sometimes it works. But why? Because when you feign disinterest, the other person feels like they are in control of the situation. It's almost like a game of emotional manipulation. The problem is that this type of approach solves nothing. You might even get the person's attention, but at what cost? You're not creating a true connection. You're just feeding a cycle of insecurities, both yours and hers. And deep down, you know it. So what is the solution? The first step is to understand what is really happening. When you feel this desperate need to regain someone's attention, what you're looking for isn't the person, it's the sense of validation they've given you. You are trying to fill an internal void with something external, and that will never work. Real change begins when you can get out of your own mind and connect with the reality of the moment. This means looking at the person in front of you and seeing them as they really are, with their own insecurities, flaws, and complexities, and not as a solution to your problems. It means accepting that sometimes people pull away, and it has nothing to do with you. And here's a thought for you to ponder. What would happen if, instead of trying to control the outcome, you simply were present? If, instead of seeking validation, you sought understanding? When you stop treating relationships as a means to an end, they become something much more valuable, a genuine exchange between two human beings. So now, I want you to do something. Think about the last time you felt this way, stuck in this cycle of expectations and frustration. What would you do differently if you had the chance? And what would it be like if, next time, you let the dance flow without trying to dictate the rhythm? If this reflection moved you, stay with me. We still have a lot to explore about how our own minds can deceive us when it comes to love. And remember, if you're looking for answers to build truer connections, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Here, we are on this journey together. No magic formulas, no games, just reality. Let's move on. Imagine this. You're in an amazing conversation with someone you just met. The exchange of messages flows like a calm river. Each response is quick and full of enthusiasm. You feel like there is something special happening. Then, out of nowhere, responses start to take a long time. Messages become shorter, almost automatic. And here comes the avalanche. What did I do wrong? Has she lost interest? Am I not enough? Sound familiar? This situation is not only common, it is almost universal. And this is no coincidence. When we connect with someone, especially at the beginning, we are full of expectations. We're not just talking, we're designing. Every word, every emoji, every silence is interpreted in light of something we create in our minds, a fantasy. Fantasies take us to dangerous places. They distort what is neutral and transform small gestures into big signs. If someone takes a while to respond, it doesn't just mean they're busy, it means they don't care. If someone doesn't send you a good morning message, it's because they've lost interest. And so, we build a sandcastle made of assumptions, only to see it crumble in the first wave of reality. And you may wonder, why do I do this? Why do I create so many expectations for something that has barely started? The answer lies in the way our mind works. When we feel vulnerable, our brain seeks quick responses. We want to understand what is happening, and more importantly, we want to protect ourselves. This is why we create narratives. They give us a feeling of control. But this control is an illusion. Here's an interesting fact. Studies show that the human brain is a prediction machine. We spend about 80% of our time trying to anticipate what will happen next. This is helpful in many areas of life, but in relationships, it can be disastrous. Because when trying to predict someone else's behavior, we fail to see who they really are. We are so stuck with what we wait may it happen that we ignore what is happening. Now, let me tell you a story. Clara was an intense person. When she met someone she liked, she dove deep. I planned conversations, imagined future meetings, even what they would say to each other months later. For her, each interaction was a piece of a larger puzzle, but invariably, things went wrong. People moved away, and Clara was left with the feeling that it would never be enough. The problem? Clara was relating more to the ideas in her head than the people in front of her. Every time something didn't follow the script she had created, reality felt like a betrayal. And, as with so many of us, this wasn't Clara's fault. It was the result of years of living in a world where we are encouraged to idealize love. Have you ever noticed how movies, songs, and books sell us the idea that true love is a great epiphany? That there is a soulmate who will complete us and solve all our problems? This narrative is seductive but unrealistic, because truly loving someone isn't about finding the perfect person, it's about accepting imperfection. And that's difficult because it means giving up the fantasies that comfort us. Now stop for a moment and think. How many times have you interpreted something as a sign of rejection when perhaps it was just a momentary distraction from the other person? How many times have you walked away from someone because they didn't meet the ideal you created in your mind? These questions are not easy, but they are important, because as long as we are stuck in these fantasies, we will continue to disappoint ourselves. And even worse, we will continue to ignore opportunities to build something real. And here's a moment to breathe. Everything we've discussed so far may seem overwhelming, but there is a way out. It starts with awareness, with the willingness to stop, take a deep breath and ask, what's really going on here? It's a simple but powerful exercise, because when you do this, you begin to separate fantasies from reality. And here's the irony. When you stop projecting unrealistic expectations, something magical happens. You start to see the other person as they really are, and most importantly, start allowing her to see you too. Remember, a true connection is not born from perfection. It is born from vulnerability, from the willingness to be present, even when things don't follow the script you had in mind. If all of this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and enjoy the video. There is so much more for us to explore together, and I promise the journey is just beginning. You no longer need to live trapped in fantasies that never come true. It's time to embrace reality and discover that it can be even more beautiful than any dream. Shall we go together? We have reached the crux of our conversation. After everything we've explored, the expectations, the self-deprecation cycles, the fantasies, and the validation games, it's time to answer the big question: how to break this pattern and build something real. The answer, although simple, requires courage. Be present for others and for yourself. This starts with a difficult but necessary step: accepting that you can't control how someone else feels or reacts. Every attempt to manipulate the outcome, whether by exaggerating kindness, feigning disinterest, or creating unrealistic expectations, only fuels disconnection. Love, after all, is not about winning or losing. It's about sharing, about showing yourself even though you're afraid of not being accepted. Now let me tell you one last story. Rodrigo always believed that to be loved, he needed to be perfect. He invested in new clothes, impactful phrases, strategies to appear interesting, and for a while it worked. He could initiate connections, but they never lasted. Every time someone moved away, Rodrigo felt he needed to try harder. He was trapped, without realizing it, in his own cycle of expectations. One day, after another failed attempt, Rodrigo decided to try something different. He stopped worrying about what others thought and started asking himself, how can I feel good about myself? He invested in things he really enjoyed: his hobbies, his mental health, his circle of friends. He didn't do it to impress anyone, but to feel whole. And the most surprising thing happened. Connections began to emerge naturally. No scripts, no pressure. What Rodrigo learned, and what you can learn too, is that when you like yourself, the people around you feel it. Not because you're pretending to be confident, but because you're genuinely at peace. And that is magnetic. And here's the most important secret of all. Relationships are not about finding someone to fill a void. They are about sharing the fullness of your own life with someone else. This means accepting that love isn't perfect and that it won't always be easy. but it also means understanding that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. The right person won't be looking for your best speech or your best outfit. She will be looking for you with all your flaws, your insecurities, and most importantly, your willingness to try. So how do you start this change? Here are 3 simple steps you can take today. Let go of fantasies. When you realize you are creating unrealistic scenarios, stop and ask, is this really happening, or is it just something I'm imagining? Bring yourself back to the present. Be curious, not anxious. When you meet someone, let curiosity guide you. Don't treat the interaction like an interview to gain approval. Find out who the other person is without expectations. Take care of yourself. This is more than a cliche. Invest in what makes you happy. When you feel good about yourself, connections stop being a necessity and become a gift. And finally, remember, no matter where you are on your journey, you are making progress. The simple fact of being here, seeking to understand more about yourself and your relationships, is already a gigantic step. You don't need to have all the answers today. No one does. What matters is that you are willing to learn, grow, and eventually open up to the kind of connection that really matters. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to take it a step further. Subscribe to the channel and like this video. But more importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. How are you handling your expectations? What stops you from being present? Your story can inspire others to start their own journeys. And before we finish, I want to deeply thank you for being here. Your attention, your willingness to listen and reflect, make it all worth it. In the next video, we'll explore how to strengthen our connections with friends and family, because love and relationships go far beyond romance. Until then, remember, you are enough. You are worthy of love and connection, just as you are. And the first step to finding this is living in the present moment. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. See you soon. Shall we go together?